So here is Exhibit C, The Possibility of Evil by Shirley Jackson. Miss Adela Strangeworth stepped daintily along Main Street on her way to the grocery. The sun was shining, the air was fresh and clear after the night's heavy rain, and everything in Mrs. Strangeworth's little town looked washed and bright. Miss Strangeworth took deep breaths and thought there was nothing in the world like a fragrant summer day. She knew everyone in town, of course. She was fond of telling strangers, tourists, who sometimes passed through the town and stopped to admire Miss Strangeworth roses, that she had never spent more than a day outside this town in all of her long life. She was 71, Miss Strangeworth told this tourist, with a pretty little dimple showing by her lip, and she sometimes found herself thinking that the town belonged to her. My grandfather built the first house on Pleasant Street, she would say, opening her blue eyes wide with the wonder of it. This house right here. My family has lived here for better than 100 years. My grandmother planted these roses, and my mother tended them just as I do. I've watched my town grow. I can remember when Mr. Lewis Sr. opened the grocery store in the year the river flooded out the shanties on the low road, and the excitement when some young folks wanted to move the park over to the space in front of where the new post office is today. They wanted to put up a statue of Ethan Allen. Miss Strangeworth would frown a little and sound stern. But it should have been a statue of my grandfather. There wouldn't have been a town here at all if it hadn't been for my grandfather and the lumber mill. Miss Strangeworth never gave away any of her roses, although the tourist often asked her. The roses belonged on Pleasant Street, and it bothered Miss Strangeworth to think of people wanting to carry them away, to take them into strange towns and down strange streets. When the new minister came and the ladies were gathering flowers to decorate the church, Miss Strangeworth sent over a great basket of gladioli, which she picked the roses at all. She set them in bowls and vases around the inside of the house her grandfather had built. Walking down Main Street on a summer morning, Miss Strangeworth had to stop every minute or so to say good morning to someone or to ask someone's health. When she came into the grocery, half a dozen people turned away from the shelves and the counters to wave at her or to call out good morning. "And good morning to you too, Mr. Lewis," Miss Strangeworth said at last. The Lewis family had been in town almost as long as the Strangeworths, but the day young Lewis left high school and went to work in the grocery, Miss Strangeworth had stopped calling him Tommy and started calling him Mr. Lewis, and he had stopped calling her Addie and started calling her Miss Strangeworth. They had been in high school together and had gone to picnics together and to high school dances and basketball games, but now Mr. Lewis was behind the counter in the grocery and Miss Strangeworth was living alone in the Strangeworth house on Pleasant Street. "Good morning," Mr. Lewis said, and added politely, "Lovely day." "It is a very nice day," Miss Strangeworth said, as though she had only just decided that it would do after all. "I would like a chop, please, Mr. Lewis, a small, lean veal chop. Are those strawberries from Arthur Parker's garden? They're early this year." "He brought them in this morning," Mr. Lewis said. "I shall have a box," Miss Strangeworth said. Mr. Lewis looked worried, she thought, and for a minute she hesitated, but then she decided that he surely could not be worried over the strawberries. He looked very tired indeed. He was usually so chipper, Miss Strangeworth thought, and almost commented, but it was far too personal a subject to be introduced to Mr. Lewis the grocer. So she only said, "And a can of cat food, and I think a tomato." Silently, Mr. Lewis assembled her order on the counter and waited. Miss Strangeworth looked at him curiously and then said, "It's Tuesday, Mr. Lewis. You forgot to remind me." Did I? Sorry." "Imagine you're forgetting that I always buy my tea on Tuesday," Miss Strangeworth said gently. "A quarter-pound of tea, please, Mr. Lewis." "Is that all, Miss Strangeworth?" "Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Such a lovely day, isn't it?" "Lovely," Mr. Lewis said. Miss Strangeworth moved slightly to make room for Mrs. Harper at the counter. "Morning, Adela," Mrs. Harper said, and Miss Strangeworth said, "Good morning, Martha." "Lovely day," Mrs. Harper said, and Miss Strangeworth said, "Yes, lovely," and Mr. Lewis, under Mrs. Harper's glance, nodded. "Ran out of sugar for my cake frosting," Mrs. Harper explained. Her hand shook slightly as she opened her pocketbook. Miss Strangeworth wondered, glancing at her quickly, if she had been taking proper care of herself. Martha Harper was not as young as she used to be, Miss Strangeworth thought. She probably could use a good, strong tonic. "Martha," she said, "you don't look well." "I'm perfectly all right," Mrs. Harper said shortly. She handed her money to Mr. Lewis, took her change and her sugar, and went out without speaking again. Looking after her, Miss Strangeworth shook her head slightly. Martha definitely did not look well. Carrying her little bag of groceries, Miss Strangeworth came out of the store into the bright sunlight and stopped to smile down on the Crane baby. Don and Helen Crane were really the two most infatuated young parents she had ever known, she thought indulgently, looking at the delicately embroidered baby cap and the lace-edged carriage cover. "That little girl's going to grow up expecting luxury all her life," she said to Helen Crane. Helen laughed. "That's the way we want her to feel," she said. "Like a princess." "A princess can be a lot of trouble sometimes," Miss Strangeworth said dryly. "How old is Her Highness now?" 6 months next Tuesday, Helen Crane said, looking down with rapt wonder at her child. "I've been worrying, though, about her. Don't you think she ought to move around more? Try to sit up, for instance?" "For plain and fancy worrying," Miss Strangeworth said, amused. "Give me a new mother every time." "She just seems slow," Helen Crane said. "Nonsense. All babies are different. Some of them develop much more quickly than others." "That's what my mother says," Helen Crane laughed, looking a little bit ashamed. "I suppose you got young Don all upset about the fact that his daughter is already 6 months old and hasn't yet begun to learn to dance?" "I've mentioned it to him. I suppose she's just so precious that I worry about her all the time." "Well, apologize to her right now," Mrs. Strangeworth said. "She's probably worrying about why you keep jumping around all the time." Smiling to herself and shaking her old head, she went on down the sunny street, stopping once to ask little Billy Moore why he wasn't out riding in his daddy's new shiny car, and talking for a few minutes outside the library with Miss Chandler, the librarian, about the new novels to be ordered and paid for by the annual library appropriation. Miss Chandler seemed absent-minded and very much as though she was thinking about something else. Miss Strangeworth noticed that Miss Chandler had not taken much trouble with her hair that morning and sighed. Miss Strangeworth hated sloppiness. Many people seemed disturbed recently, Miss Strangeworth thought. Only yesterday the Stewarts' 15-year-old Linda had run crying down their front walk and all the way to school, not caring who saw her. People around town thought she might have had a fight with the Harris boy, but they showed up together at the soda shop after school as usual, both of them looking grim and bleak. Trouble at home, people concluded, and sighed over the problems of trying to raise kids right these days. From halfway down the block, Miss Strangeworth could catch the heavy accent of her roses, and she moved a little more quickly. The perfume of roses meant home, and home meant the Strangeworth house on Pleasant Street. Miss Strangeworth stopped at her own front gate as she always did and looked with deep pleasure at her house with the red and pink and white roses massed along the narrow lawn, and the rambler going up along the porch, and the neat, unbelievably trim lines of the house itself, with its slimness and its washed white look. Every window sparkled, every curtain hung stiff and straight, and even the stones of the front walk were swept and clear. People around town wondered how old Miss Strangeworth managed to keep the house looking the way it did, and there was a legend about a tourist once mistaking it for the local museum and going all through the place without finding out about his mistake. But the town was proud of Miss Strangeworth and her roses and her house. They had all grown together. Miss Strangeworth kept going up her front steps, unlocked her front door with her key, and went into the kitchen to put away her groceries. She debated having a cup of tea and then decided that it was too close to midday dinner time. She would not have the appetite for a little chop if she had tea now. Instead, she went into the light, lovely sitting room, which still glowed from the hands of her mother and her grandmother, who had covered the chairs with bright chintz and hung the curtains. All the furniture was spare and shining, and the round hooked rugs on the floor had been the work of Miss Strangeworth's grandmother and her mother. Miss Strangeworth had put a bowl of her red roses on the low table before the window, and the room was full of their scent. Miss Strangeworth went to the narrow desk in the corner and unlocked it with her key. She never knew when she might feel like writing a letter, so she kept her notepaper inside, and the desk locked. Miss Strangeworth's usual stationery was heavy and cream-colored, with Strangeworth House engraved across the top. But when she felt like writing her other letters, Miss Strangeworth used a pad of various colored paper, bought from the local newspaper shop. It was almost a town joke, that colored paper, layered in pink and green and blue and yellow. Everyone in town bought it and used it for odd informal notes and shopping lists. It was usual to remark upon receiving a note written on a blue page that so-and-so would be needing a new pad soon. Here she was, down to the blue already. Everyone used the matching envelopes for tucking away recipes or keeping odd little things in, or even to hold cookies in the school lunchboxes. Mr. Lewis sometimes gave them to the children for carrying home penny candy. Although Miss Strangeworth's desk held a trimmed quill pen which had belonged to her grandfather, and a gold frost fountain pen which had belonged to her father, Miss Strangeworth always used a dull stub of pencil when she wrote her letters, and she printed them in a childish block print. After thinking for a minute, although she had been phrasing the letter in the back of her mind all the way home, she wrote on a pink sheet, "Didn't you ever see an idiot child before? Some people just shouldn't have children, should they?" She was pleased with the letter. She was fond of doing things exactly right. When she made a mistake, as she sometimes did, or when the letters were not spaced nicely on the page, she had to take the discarded page to the kitchen stove and burn it at once. Miss Strangeworth never delayed when things had to be done. After thinking for a minute, she decided that she would like to write another letter, perhaps to go to Mrs. Harper to follow up the one she already mailed. She selected a green sheet this time and wrote quickly. Have you found out yet what they were all laughing about after you left the bridge club on Thursday? Or is it the wife really always the last one to know? So there's about 5 more pages of The Possibility of Evil by Shirley Jackson, and I implore you to go out and buy a Penguin Classics edition of her Dark Tales, as seen in the video. Dark Tales by Shirley Jackson. It's her more darker short stories. And, I just recently started reading this. I'm almost done with it, and her short story style is just freaking mind-blowing as a horror fan, as someone who's read Beaumont and Matheson and Bradbury. Shirley Jackson really doesn't get enough recognition. Maybe some sexism there, but she wrote more than just The Haunting of Hill House and The Lottery. I would highly recommend reading everything she's put out, because I'm definitely going to before I die if I can help it. But anyways, that's been Exhibit C, and I hope you've enjoyed.